Chapter 4. Late Night Visitors. What's on your mind? The two maids were serving food, and the little girl sitting on Fan Xian's right-hand side asked with a beep. The little girl's skin was a bit dark and thin, so sitting with the pretty, girl-like Fan Xian made her look extra pitiful. Fan Xian reached out his hand and rubbed the yellow hairs on the little girl's head, smiling cheekily, thinking about inside Kyoto, what kind of dishes you guys usually eat. This little girl, even younger than Fan Xian, was Count Sinan's own daughter, his half-sister, called Ruo. Because she had been weak and sickly since she was young, and the old madam's heart ached for this granddaughter, she had received Tanyuzu a year ago to recuperate. After nearly a year, there is no improvement. The hair on the head is still a little thin. Official family, naturally, will not lack of clothing and food, so it cannot be malnutrition, probably congenital weakness. Fan Xian and this little girl are very close, although he is dealing with this little girl with the mentality of an uncle, just heartbroken each other, so from time to take her to play, tell her stories, but in the eyes of the onlookers, it has become a proof of their brother and sister love. It was just that Fan Xian's identity was a bit awkward. A bastard child could not be compared to a proper young lady after all, so the maids deliberately did not mention anything about that earl's mansion in Kyoto. Here brother asked. The little girl, very seriously wrenching fingers, began to count. In Kyoto generally eat what things, but count to count, 3-year-old little girl which remember what, will only flip back and forth to say sugar gourd and noodle person child. After dinner, it was already a bit late. The sun was half sunk on the other side of the land. The thick twilight covered the whole courtyard. Wakey, you're still a weakling. Brother bully. Okay, what do you want to hear today? Snow White. Fan Xian suddenly laughed, and fortunately there was no one else beside him, or else he would have been startled to see such a strange smile that only an adult could have surfaced on the face of a 4-year-old boy. Brother will tell you a ghost story, okay? No good. Fan Ruo was startled, desperately shaking his head, and 2 lines of clear tears actually dripped down immediately from his dark little face, obviously having been poisoned by a lot of ghost stories in this year. Bullying the little girl was only one of Fan Xian's bad jokes. What he did best was still bullying those maids, often telling them ghost stories, then scaring those youthful girls into screaming nonstop, all of them squeezing into a ball on the bed. Although Fan Xian couldn't possibly tease them with his words in order to cover himself up, he could always enjoy a fragrant and creamy embrace at this time. He consoled himself with the fact that he was still a small child, still in the period of needing to be touched, and that these weren't considered shameless, just very normal needs. And whenever the maids wondered how the young master could possibly know so many horrible stories at such a young age, Fan Xian would put the blame on the teaching teacher. So the maids were now looking at Mr. Teaching with some mischief in their eyes, thinking to themselves that Master Earl had spent a great deal of money to invite you to come and give the young master a lecture, and you actually told him ghost stories, scaring the little children, not to mention scaring us, the flower children. You are just too big of a sin. In accordance with the old routine of ghost stories after the end of the night talk, the 2 maids with a frightened face, but still have the feeling of satisfaction, wait for the little guy washed, then close the door to let him sleep. It seemed to be another normal night. Fan Xian will be his head under the hard porcelain pillow to the side, and go to the closet to take out the winter wear robe, regular into 4 sides, will become a pillow. He leaned on the pillow, but his eyes were open, glowing in the darkness of the night, and he did not sleep for a long time. Although he had already accepted the fact that he had been reincarnated into this world, he was not necessarily able to get used to this fact, and it was really uncomfortable to have to go to sleep at this time when it should only be a little after 9 o'clock in the evening. Not to mention that he had already slept in a hospital bed long enough in his previous life. He touched the surface of the bed and realized that the hidden compartments he made shouldn't be seen by anyone, and slightly put down his heart. Naturally, the true qi in his body began to flow slowly, and at any time, he might enter that kind of meditative state. In the moment before entering the state of emptiness, Fan Xian thought about how he should live in this world. How should he live these decades in the future? Before he could enter the vegetative state to fantasize about his future 3 wives and 4 concubines, he was awakened by an unexpected visitor. "Are you Fan Xian?" There was suddenly an extra person in front of his bed, and those eyes were all icy colors, with a hint of unusual brown tinting his pupils, and at a glance, it was clear that the other person wouldn't be much of a lover of life. A very courteous line of questioning, but if it was asked from the mouth of someone who sneaked into your bedroom in the middle of the night and was masked, with a knife in his hand and a few pouches on his waist, it was undoubtedly very frightening. It was also thanks to the fact that Fan Xian wasn't really a 4-year-old boy, or else he would have screamed out within the first few moments of seeing this strange uncle. With his toes, he could also think that a nocturnal man who could enter the Earl's mansion without a sound must be a strong and ruthless fellow, and if he screamed, then the other party would surely kill him. Thinking of this, Fan Xian couldn't help but be a little proud of his ability to stay calm in a crisis, coughed twice, forcibly suppressed the incomparable nervousness within his heart, and pretended to be the most adorable image of a good boy, and pounced on him. "Daddy, you're finally back." A 4-year-old little boy tearfully jumped into the arms of a certain killer, his hands tightly embracing his waist, only that the little child's hands were too short, so they couldn't wring it over, so they had to forcefully grab the other party's clothes, as if they were afraid that the other party would run away on this. Perhaps because the grip is too hard, so hissing sound, the little boy's hands will tear off the other party's piece of fabric. The Nightwalker frowned, and without seeing how he moved, his entire body disentangled itself from Fan Xian's embrace and stood dumbfounded, as if pondering why this bastard son of Earl Sinan was calling himself his father. At the same time, he was puzzled. His own clothes were of special grade in the courtyard, even a knife could not easily cut through them, so how did this young child scratch them with his hands? He was puzzled, and Fan Xian was even more puzzled to the point of vomiting blood in his heart. While there was no one around, Fan Xian often used the rocks on the rockery to test the power of the nameless true qi in his body, and after realizing that his tender, thin, little fingers could barely crush the not-so-tough turquoise rocks, he gained a certain amount of confidence in his own self-defense abilities. Fan Xian managed to get the other party to let his guard down with the 4-year-old boy crying trick, and then transported his entire body's true power onto his fingers, thinking that he could restrain the other party, but who knew that he would only be able to grab down a few threads of rags. "It seems that something is going to happen."